So, hello and welcome to our coverage here with World Cycling Productions of the 65th edition of La Fleche Wallonne, the race across the Wallonne area of Belgium, which is the opposite side of the country to the recent Tour of Flanders Classic. This is the start this morning, and the riders coming together on what is a very cold day.
Well, Michael Bogert here was asked, he was a member of the favourites, and did he think he could win? Possibly. Despite the wind and rain today, is it a race for you? I don't know. It's a very difficult race with lots of favourites. It's very hard. Another big favourite today, Phil, is going to be Davide Rebellin. He's had a great start to the season.
He's riding extremely well, as he always does. Winner of the recent Tour of the Mediterranean, the champion of Italy, Michele Bartoli, one win this year. And the Lotto team, well, they provided the second place finisher last year in Rick Verbrugge.
Verbrugge reckons that the first part of his season went fairly well. And do you think you can do better than last year? If I can do it, that would be great, but it's not easy. I'm going to do the maximum that I can, but don't forget there's still Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and these are the races that suit me, and I'll do my best.
And the team which is split away now from Mappe, Domo Freaks, also looking for a result here today. Wet conditions are not the best of springs at all for these early spring classics. This is not a World Cup event, that'll come in a couple of days' time, Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Out on the action now. The race, by the way, is 198 kilometres, and there were 182 riders leaving the start. Attack starting right out at the beginning after only 20 kilometres today. A group of some 12 riders getting clear, one of them this rider here, Marcelino Garcia Alonso, on the new CSC World Online squad.
A lot of these teams, Phil, they really want to put a performance in during the Classics because they're looking for a berth in the Tour de France later in the year. And this team, the new CSC Online team, run by Bjarne Riis, is one of those teams looking for a slot at the Tour de France.
You caught a glimpse of the trees there. Well, there's still no sign of spring. It's been very, very cold, hardly seen the sun. And those of you that will have seen our video of Paris-Roubaix, then you will know just how bad the weather can get in this part of the world at this time of the year. Now, this rider trying to establish and draw the rest of the race away here. Still a long way to go. They climbed the Mur de Huy 3 times. That's the big challenge of this famous classic, which once formed part of the famous Ardennes weekend. They used to ride this on one day and Liège-Bastogne-Liège the other day. And they still have a joint prize for the highest placed rider in the aggregate of both events.
Fleche Wallonne usually marks the time when we see a different kind of rider coming to the fore as well. The Flandrian Classics and Paris-Roubaix, for example, sees the tough Belgian riders, specialists on the flat courses. But these races here around the Ardennes are much more undulating, and it's the first time we really get to see the contenders for the major stage races coming forward. The Italians and Spanish teams certainly the ones who thrive on this terrain.
Here's the strong Mappe boys. As I say, they've parted company with half of their riders this year, have gone across the new Domo Farm Freaks team. And as a result, neither squad are really firing just now. But this man is persisting and trying to get something on the go. This course isn't just the subject of one hill, the start-finishing area, or the finish area as it is. It's also out on the course. There are a number of nasty little climbs today.
It really is a wearing down process, but the Mur de Huy, probably the most difficult finish of any of the one-day classics. Riders needing to use around about a 25-tooth sprocket, and if you've got sore legs at the end, you ain't going to get up it.
Still a big peloton here as they continue and still trying to decide how they're going to split this race up. Very often a race on the last circuit, once they're over the Mur de Huy with one lap to go, a different lap to the previous lap, They then race around the hillside here in the Ardennes, back down to the ground level along the banks of the River Mars, and then back up the hill for the finish. A grinding climb, 25%, and a massive crowd, as always, awaiting the riders as they come up to the finishing line. There's a lot of racing being done there, Paul. The wind is coming from the right of our picture at the moment, pinning the riders. There's Michele Bartoli, and the Mappe boys have an interest here.
Well, they certainly feel that today is a good day for Michele Bartoli. Not really firing so well since the start of the season. He had a great win with that victory in Het Volk, but not riding as well in the Tour of Flanders as he would have expected to. Faso Bortolo moving Vladimiro Belli a little further forward, but right now the Spanish rider on CSC Online has got complete command. The pace shutting off a little bit now, Phil, but as we approach the hillier section of the course, we'll see Michele Bartoli and the tricolor as champion of Italy coming much closer to the front.
Well, Garcia, a frequent attacker today. He was in the early move. He's now continuing. We're midway through the race here, still trying to cause the attraction of somebody to come out and join him. It is a little bit ambitious to try and stay out there because these guys are racing quite clearly now to split up the front section of the peloton.
Once again, the rain's starting to come down. The temperature's very cold in this part of the Ardennes, and most certainly here a lot of riders suffering from this cold. Many of the big names, Phil, thinking about Liège-Bastogne-Liège, the next round in the World Cup, which comes up on Sunday. And here Ivan Basso in second position there for Faso Bortolo.
I caught a sight there earlier too of Dario Frigo, who's had a great start to the year with a victory in Paris-Nice. Little bit of a surprise that, but he is a young developing rider, and there's still a lot of riders anxious to keep this pace high. It doesn't signal a lot of success for the attacker, but he'll stick at it and see what happens. The roads here are very exposed when you're away from the wooded area of the Ardennes. This is the most beautiful part, by the way, if you ever want to go riding a bike. I see we've got Niemann there too, the German rider on the Rabobank team. Now this man has a strong team. There's a chance he too is going to pull out a good performance.
It's a very good rider that the Rabobank boys have brought across, but I would have thought today they'd be looking a lot after Michael Bogard. This is certainly the kind of course for him, but as I said, many of the riders, Phil, they tend to hold back a little bit in Fleche Wallonne these days because of Liège-Bastogne-Liège coming up soon. But you can see another attack coming off the front here. It looks like one of the Benesto riders trying to launch an attack and set their firing pin.
Well, this looks like César Solon. I think it's a Benesto rider who's having a little bit of a breakaway, trying to get a movement. We've still got Marcelino Garcia Alonso up front, who are in the area now of the Côte de Paille, and he's gone well clear. But again, there's no big groups getting across, and going across on your own is not to be recommended, but he's going to give it a go. César Solon of the Benesto team. They could also do with a little result now, but this is the time when we see the Benesto boys start to come in to the big races. They don't like the earlier season classics, but they always turn up for the Ardennes.
Tell you one thing, they probably don't like this weather out here at the moment either, because there are a few flakes of snow coming into these little frails of wind and rain coming across here right now. The temperature close down to around about 0 degrees or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, almost freezing. Very difficult conditions, which is why you see most of these riders feel very much wrapped up against the conditions.
He's got the speed on his legs as the wind has pushed him over to the left of the road. He's the lone leader. He's still up there now, but he's being chased here on the Côte de Paille. Holding a nice steady pace, Solon is racing across this gap with all the strength he can muster here. I'm not surprised he's well wrapped up for the occasion either. Gloves, arm warmers, long legs he's got on. Blends in nicely with the bike at least as he starts now to race across. And we could do with seeing signs of a small group perhaps, but he's pulling away from the field at the moment.
He's decided he's going to go out on the attack to try and bridge the gap. Rather a brave move right now, and I have to agree, Phil, the ideal situation for anybody trying to bridge the gap to the leader right now would be to do it in a breakaway situation before we get to the real steep repetitive climbs. Information coming here forward from the CSC World Online team to their man at the front to let them know just exactly what's happening. I think the riders too will be quite happy with the sun piercing through the clouds right now, just trying to cheer up the Belgian atmosphere.
Little group getting away here now as they're starting to consolidate, followed by the neutral service, a sign they've got more than 30 seconds over the field, and coming together here at the front. Now this has got a bit more taste to it, this group here, because Domo Friets have got themselves a rider here, looks like Koos Murenhout, and he's a strong boy that starts working with these guys. This now group is beginning to swell a little bit.
The other rider from Spain there is Jorg Yacht. He's actually riding for the Once squad. A very strong man on the farm side. Domo Farm Fritz, apart from winning Paris-Roubaix, have had a very difficult start to the season, Phil. They were billed as the Super Belgian team. On the start line this morning, the Belgian national champion rides for that squad, Axel Merckx, and he too now is looking to ride himself into some kind of form after a very difficult early season which involved several accidents and forced him to pull out of Milan-San Remo.
Nice tempo here. This is indeed Jörg Jatsk, German on the Spanish Once. Moorenhout is the rider up here as well, getting a very good workman-like breakaway. This is César Solon, who is beginning to distinguish himself around the circuits this time around. Very strong man.
Very strong man indeed. I don't see the winner of this race coming out of that group behind though, Phil. I feel certain that we'll see some of the bigger names come out and put the hammer down a little later on as we get much closer to the Mur de Huy. And on the Mur de Huy we will see a severe testing of all the major favourites. It's a very difficult climb, and very often that's where the race does start to split up and we see the big names coming forward for the first time in this race.
Just look at the big chain wheel this man is pushing. Very heavy gear at all here as he continues. Dropping back to this chase group, becoming rather select. It looks about 6 riders here trying to get across the ground. They're building the lead over the main field now of around about a minute back to the bunch. So they've started to get things going. So perhaps it's not been a bad move by Marcelino Garcia Alonso, because he's got a group away now that is well worth having.
Well, he'll soon get the information from his team manager, because most of these riders communicate with their team managers by little two-way radios now, and he will know that the group is coming across, and very shortly he will know the composition of that group. And sensibly, it would be an ideal situation for him to sit and wait up for a group, because it is a very difficult run-in on the way to the finish line in the Mur de Huy, and he would do a lot better to find himself in a group right now.
Looking at the Rabobank rider there as we go further along the group here. Mappe have got their rider in this breakaway as well. Always a good sign once Mappe gets somebody in there. This is Paolo Lanfranchi, I think, who's got into the lead group. No, it's not. It's his teammate, Luca Scinto. Another strong man to have in a breakaway as he goes clear. It's causing a little bit of consternation here, although the weather has brightened up a little bit. It's got hardly any warmer, but at least there's no rain right now.
The rider in the orange jersey in the breakaway there, in fact, was the brother of David Echavarria, Unai Echavarria, one of the riders on the new and very much regarded Basque team. In fact, the Basque Euskaltel squad are very strong since the start of this season.
And still looking down at the man who started what could be a winning move here, as now they're beginning to group together in the chase. And this is beginning to look now, as we speed around the circuit, heading back towards the town of Spa, where we've been once already today. The start being made from Charleroi. The Fleche Wallonne is pretty inconsistent with its starts and finish, although it's settled down these last few years with its finish on the Mur de Huy. But it dodges around the place with its start towns. It started for the first time in Charleroi in 1998. That was Bo Hamburger who won that one. And now we've been going Charleroi since 1998, but a long history there. We keep popping back to Charleroi ever since 1945, that was, when the first visit was paid to Charleroi for the finish. The race then, by the way, was won by the Belgian rider Marcel Kint.
Well, it's basically always been around the Ardennes area, and this is a very difficult area to race, especially at this time of the year, because the weather is usually very inclement. And I've been down here, Phil, many times to these Ardennes Classics when the riders have had to contend with snow still at the side of the roads. Well, there's Bjarne Riis in the team car now, coming alongside, very happy with his team at the moment, and he is certainly polling the Society Tour de France to get selection for the big race in the month of July, coming alongside the Spanish rider on his squad here, giving him some advice, probably asking him right now to sit up and wait for the group behind, telling him the composition of that group. And Bjarne Riis certainly very actively involved with this brand new team on the block.
I think this is a big, this is the first time I've actually seen Bjarne Riis this season in the hot seat as team director. But you know, the riders have a great deal of confidence in that man's ability already. Very important that they get these riders in the breakaways now. This event is organised by the same organisation as the Tour de France, and so they want to impress for one of those wildcard places.
Well, here is Marcelino Alonso just up the road there, Phil. You can see the yellow car. That's the neutral service vehicle. He's following every rider who needs service out on the course, and very shortly I think we'll find a two-man group at the head of affairs, but that six-man group behind also seems to be closing in on the leaders.
Looking back at the big peloton on massive wheels here, still no great consternation apparently. We've got something like 8 riders up the road. We've got Wallonne chasing alone. We've got 6 riders in between. We've got the leader. They are not together, that the bunch is beginning to languish on the way back, about a minute down by the look of it. Still not a great deal of urgency there, Paul.
Not for the moment, but it won't be until we start to get into the repetitive part of the course where all of the big hills are. That's when the big names will come to the front. And they realise a minute-and-a-half or 2-minute advantage on a course like this is absolutely nothing, because when they turn the screws on, they can pull back that kind of speed very quickly. Now you can see here Garcia Alonso looking over his shoulder. He obviously realises that he's about to get company.
Right, now this should be about 6 or 7 riders coming up here at the moment. But the team car, that's the race judges' car, going by him. They've realised that Garcia Alonso, who's worked very hard today to make something of a breakaway, he was in the early moves and then he went back into the pack, and now he's hoping that this might be a better and more intelligent selection coming up. Further back down, the sun getting out at last, warming the cockles of the hearts of the riders as they continue to try and get some control of the front. At the moment they are not succeeding. These small little hills nagging at the legs all of the time, and I should imagine all of them quite afraid at the climb of the Huy just ahead. Now, how many riders are coming up? Here they are.
Here they are, that group of 6 is there, and I would expect to see César Wallonne in there as well. So we now have a completely different face to the main field. On the front of the pack though, Phil, a lot of blue and yellow jerseys of the Festina squad coming forward right now. They seem to be taking a certain amount of interest in the pacemaking, and it seems very much as if Mapei now have decided to shut it down for a while and wait until we get to the more strategic points.
Even the rapeseed there, unwilling to burst into yellow flower at this time of the year. The fields are often extremely pretty, but right now the cold weather keeping them about a week or so behind their schedule, as these riders, having run a little bit behind schedule because the race was stopped earlier on today by a demonstration on the Mer de Huy about riders, about a group of workers striking over a dispute they had. But all is well. The race is now continuing, and we've got some 7 riders out in front.
Still not very much reaction in the main field at the moment, and you can see the riders pretty much spread out across the road. But once it starts to get a little bit grippy on these fields, Phil, because these parts of the course where it's open like this is very, very difficult, especially with the crosswinds coming across later on, and that's when you see teams organising the echelons and trying to split the group as much as possible. For the moment, nearly all the major favourites are still in this large group at the moment, and they don't seem too worried at all about the fact that there is a pretty serious group going off the front.
Well, the echelon's forcing a lot of hard work here. You see, the road's very narrow. It's very difficult on a road like this for any one team to control the chase. There are a number of different coloured jerseys up there, and they're not making that big an impression. There's still a fair way to go, Paul, and I would suggest here that these riders aren't getting away as fast as they might like to think. Because sat at the back here is Niederman, the new man on the Rabobank squad.
His rider's progress is not super at the moment, but this man is trying to bridge the gap. Just in front you can see the yellow car there, that's the neutral service vehicle. Behind the leading group, which is now 7 riders strong, César Wallonne has almost made the junction here. He's done a very long, hard ride on his own, Phil, to try and get across the gap right now. But he has, I think, since the start of this season, ridden very well indeed, and could cause a surprise because it's a long time since we've had a Spanish winner to one of these one-day classics.
And we've got here now somewhere in the region of 43 kilometres still to race here. That's about 27 miles to go to the finish. And César Wallonne, it's been a long chase for him to bridge. We had 2 lone riders on the course, 1 up front and 1 in between. And now we've got this break of 6 settling down with the leader caught and the back marker about to get on. And that's going to make a front group of 8 riders if they can make contact.
Well, on the back here, 166 is Unai Echavarria, David's brother. On the new Euskaltel team, David Echavarria transferring across from the Once squad and becoming the #1 leader of this small Basque team, who are very aggressive in most of the races in Spain. And David Echavarria riding very well in the one-day classics last year and hoping for a repeat performance of his very good 2nd place in Liège-Bastogne-Liège last year.
Sitting at the back there is Koos Murenhout. Also looking for a little bit of form, because the Domo Farm Frites team certainly need a result right now, and they know it, and so the pressure is on them as they come through. Johan Museo has appeared. They've done well. They got the first 3 in Paris-Roubaix. but now they've slipped back into the old rhythm which they had before Paris-Roubaix. Johan Museo, that's always been his race, but he was outwitted by Servais Knaven this time around, his teammate. I don't think he was too unhappy about that.
I think the team were just happy to get a very good victory under their belt because they've been chasing something big since the start of the season. They have been regarded as a super team. They have got selection for the Tour de France, but they needed that victory. But once again, they proved that their team manager was the man to get really everybody motivated for Paris-Roubaix. And the first time I saw a clean sweep, first, second and third in Paris-Roubaix, I thought, well, that's never going to happen again. And there you go, they've done it about 4 times now.
Yeah, absolutely unbelievable. That's a race that they really study and love, and the manage there is excellent. Now, looking down at the break, they're still not getting themselves organised, and they could allow this race to run away from them with such a short distance still to go. Not the end of the hills, there's still a couple of more small climbs before we go up the big one, which is the Muir de Huy. So there is chance here. The Spanish rider still trying to tag on to the back as the main field keep control at the head.
This race at just inside 200 kilometres is normally covered in around about 5 hours of racing, and you can see the speed is starting to pick up quite a bit now, Phil, in the main field. The line is getting a little bit longer at the front of the peloton there as certain teams start to send up riders to pick up the pacemaking before we start to come to the more strategic point, the climbs, which are very repetitive here. I always feel that the Benaïn, the penultimate climb of the day, is a very difficult one. It's fairly open compared to the rest of the area around here, which, as you can see, is very forested in this part of the Ardennes. And because of the wind coming across, it really does tend to split. But look at this now. You can see just there on the left-hand side, César Solon has reintegrated into the front group. So we're now looking at a leading group of 8 riders strong.
So he's on, and he's got himself on here with just a couple of small climbs to come before the big finish on the Muir de Huy. It looks as though Koos Moonhout's having a little bit of heavy legs just now at the back of this group, as the rest of the riders just keep a steady rhythm here. They're not trying to break it all up. They know it's a long way to go. They know the roads are staying heavy for a while, plus a hard descent down the bottom too. Still, an attack being launched here now. It looks like Eric Decker having a go.
Well, the Rabobank boys on the attack once again. Eric Decker, one of the other Rabobank riders who's had a very good start to his season. You can see here he's wearing number 12.
So Decker is in fact coming up here, Paul, from the main field, because that's the service car from the leading group of riders. Now, this is a man who gets inspired. He's never been the same rider since those 3 stage wins last year. Always insists he's not a team leader, yet he is really a front racer now.
Well, he might not be a team leader, but he seems to win more races than anybody else in the team. He's also a very aggressive bike rider right now, which is why he's seen this breakaway situation out on the course. He's obviously going out on this move, Phil, just in case that breakaway is successful, and so that he can take a bit of pressure off the shoulders of his team leader, Michael Bogard. This is the kind of course for Michael Bogard. Decker, more of an all-rounder, not necessarily a super climber, but the kind of guy who will race hard in any conditions.
Well, this is the area now around the Côte de Coutis, and we're looking at 40 kilometres from the finish here. Now, Decker, when he left the peloton, the gap was around a minute 45. He's got away from them. The peloton are still slipping away. He may know something, or thinks he does, that nobody else does. He may have sensed that that group is not organised today. You see, at this time, this is a Wednesday. The big race that they're all thinking of is the World Cup event, Liège-Bastogne-Liège. That comes Sunday. And of course, many of the riders don't want to open up. They want to keep the form a little bit under wraps.
Well, I think, in fact, Rabobank have put a lot of responsibility on Decker's shoulders, because we saw 3 Rabobank riders on the front of the main field there, actually trying to chat and joke at the front of that group. This is Marcus Seberg, the champion of Switzerland. There is Michael Bogard there just behind him. But the whole of the team now, Phil, has come forward. Martin Den Bakker is in there as well. What they're doing now is trying to slow off the main field, takes a lot of pressure off Bogard, and if in fact Eric Decker can ride across to that group, well, he's got a pretty good chance of winning.
Well, that's true, and now we're getting a Rabobank with 2 riders up front, because Grisha Nierman's already up there. Decker has been dispatched. Things aren't looking too bad at all. This is the face of Decker now, a great workhorse normally in defence of his team, and now maybe free today to try and win himself a classic. He's got a lot of work to do here, though. He's got to bridge a gap of over a minute to those leaders, but if anybody can do it, Decker can, because he's a very good time trial rider when he races alone. Those clouds, however, a little bit of snow still in the sky there, I would suggest, and it's looking a little bit of not the best of days, but it could be a lot worse.
Certainly could. He had a great season last year. The turning point really, Phil, seemed to be the Tour de France, where he won the stages of the Tour de France, 3 of them, and each one under different circumstances. But after that he went on to get himself a classic victory by taking San Sebastian, and his start to the season was really not great because he broke his elbow last year in Paris-Roubaix, and I think it was because of that he came to the Tour de France fairly rested.
Well, back to the field, the champion of Switzerland there, Zeberg. He's on the same side as Decker, so there'll be no reaction from him. 1 or 2 more riders moving up now, especially this rider here from the Lampre-Dakin team. They have decided that the Rabobanks are trying to back them off, and maybe they should come and do something about it. Further up front, he's now a minute ahead of that group, is Eric Decker. And he's trying now to bridge up to those 7 leaders, make it 8. He's still got a couple of small climbs to come before the big one. He's absolutely flying right now.
Great position as well, very comfortable. It's a position of huge power right now. He's getting his hands into the middle of those handlebars to try and make himself as aerodynamic as possible at the front end of his machine, but he's curved right over the bike. He's got a lot of power. Well, Team Lotto now, Phil, deciding to take a little bit more interest. Their man finished 2nd overall in this race last year, Rick Verbrugge. They're getting some help from the German Telecom squad right now, and we can see a different assortment of jerseys moving to the front of the pack.
This is beginning to look as though they're all getting it together now and deciding to have a look. Looks like Vinokurov just gone through there for the Deutsche team, and Cofidis also could do with a nice result at this moment in time. As we see there, Claude Lannerly, I think it is, who's just gone through.
Much more serious though, the riding being done by Lotto on the front. They obviously are feeling they're a little bit left out. This is a race in their country right now. Let's not forget this is the top Belgian squad, although they're vying for that position with Domo Farm Friet at the moment. But they want to move Mario Aerts and Rick Verbrugge a little bit closer to the possibility of threatening for a victory. Last year Rick Verbrugge finished 2nd in this bike race, and I think he'd like to go one better than that today if he could.
Christoph Brandt, number 26 there, going through for Lotto, and they're starting to get their act together now. The Hollanders at front, Glenn de Hollander. This man's a workhorse for the Lotto team, he really is, and he's driving along now with Christoph Brandt, and I can only imagine they're trying to do something for Rick Verbrugge here, Paul. He was the rider who was 2nd last year, and he might have said, we need to close that gap down, it's getting a bit too far.
There's a pretty good team of climbers, especially for this kind of terrain as well, because they've also got Mario Aerts in the squad, as well as Serge Baguet, who is also a pretty good bike rider. Serge Baguet actually retired from the sport for a couple of years and then decided to make a comeback, and he's doing pretty well right now. But you see, the fact that Lotto have come to the front has completely changed the physiognomy at the front of the main field. Everybody wants to come forward now, and they realise that an 8-man group over a course like this, you dare not let them get too much of an advantage.
No, well, I think we're going to see the time start to tumble now, heading up towards the Côte de Bossio, or Beauhisseau, as the riders now pass through one of these beautiful Wallonne towns here. Such a different area of Belgium in comparison to the more industrialised Flanders region with the great romance of cycle racing. This is the French-speaking area of the country. And very often, you know, the Belgian people from West Flanders who come here, they can't speak the language and they're still in their own country.
Very, very strange. They actually have something called the linguistic border. On one side of the river Schelde you can speak Flemish, and on the other side you can speak French. And it seems, even if as though today, never the twain shall meet.
Now this is the breakaway, not with the cohesion. There's the man who started it all, Garcia Alonso in the red jersey. As we look now as Eric Decker tries to bridge the gap. He still looks to me as though he's going well, and I think we're in the same town now. They can't be far in front. It would be great if our cameraman swung to the left now, because I think we might see we are closing in rapidly here on the leaders, and soon we're going to have 8 men up front as Eric Decker has done a tremendous race. Now we get a chance to have a look, and up the road there, I think they are in the distance. He is coming up on them.
Phil, that is absolutely unbelievable. You can be sure that in that group up the road there, Grisha Neerman would not have been working at all, but certainly to ride across that gap, and it was almost 1:45 when he started this quest, and he's almost about to make the junction. But you know, behind there's been a serious reaction. You can see the big long line of the main field. They've picked the pace up to in excess of 45 kilometers an hour.
A little bit of a hard climb in the way here, and it looks like it's the end of the Venezuelan. This is Unai Echeverria. No relation to his more illustrious Spanish teammate, David Echeverria, but he's lost ground there, Paul. Somebody really sprinted at the front.
Well, they're putting a serious amount of pressure on. This is one of the real serious climbs there, Beauhisseau. In fact, Grisha Neerman there, number 15, is coming back pretty rapidly too. The man from World CSC Online, who started the move. He's going backwards pretty rapidly. Koos Murenhout, the Domo Fritz rider, is there right now, but it's César Solon on the front here for ibonesto.com. And in fact, for the moment, Eric Decker hasn't made the junction, so maybe in fact Neerman was sitting up and waiting for him.
Possibly, I don't know. Solon is very, very strong, and Ivan Basso was marking him and staying right with him. Interesting little stretch of legs that, and it indicated that breakaway not quite as solid as one might expect. They were in all sorts of trouble there and split all over the climb.
26 here on the front is the brother of Rick Verbrugge, Lef Verbrugge, trying to set his brother up for this very strategic point here and make sure that all the leaders are in the front 5 or 10 places going to this climb. These climbs here in this part of the Ardennes are very narrow indeed, and it's important to get around the corners that turn into them in the top 10 places.
Grisha Neerman there, we just went past him. He's got back. This man is still hurting them. I don't know if you caught a glimpse of Neerman's face there. His mouth was wide open and he was gasping. He was rather pleased to be still in over the top of that climb. That was a difficult call for him. Luca Paolini of the Mappe team, he's the rider on second wheel as they go through. And they've got a rider there too. That's Jörg Jatsk is the Onse man. He's a German on the front field. And now there's a terrific attack here going on the same climb from the bunch, which is running not much more than a minute behind.
Well, everybody knows this is very important here. This is the first chance they've got to really blow the peloton apart. A reaction coming at the back from one of the Lotto riders. I would expect that to be Mario Arts or Rick Verbrugge. Those are the ones who the team have been trying to set it up for right now, as Mercatoni Uno are launching a man right into the attack.
Looking down on the peloton, and they're still trying to get Verbrugge, we believe, off the front of this group here. But these constant attacks now and the daylight that we have seen in the breakaway indicates I don't see that breakaway staying out there for the rest of the race. It is a very difficult situation, something like 28 kilometers to go. And it isn't a long way, but unfortunately the wall is in front of them, and that is the wall of Huy.
Rick Verbrugge now making the counter-attack. He has to do this, Phil, because his team have done a lot of work along the Valley Road to set him up for this big attack here. The Mercatoni Uno rider who's in that group, in fact, is Igor Astorola. He's a Spanish rider on the squad. He may well have been brought in to strengthen the team for the Tour de France for Marco Pantani. But this here is the attack of Verbrugge on the left-hand side. A big acceleration by him. Straight out of the saddle. He's feeling very much at home here in the Ardennes. He's racing on home turf, and he wants to make sure that he's in all of the counterattacks now, and the best way to be in one is to go straight afterward.
Well, that's a very good effort, that, because he's attacking after the Onse rider launched his, came up there very, very well, and now he's got himself clear. It was perhaps more advisable to go with somebody else's attack than make one yourself, because when you make it yourself and you're an expected name, then the peloton reacts and jumps on you. He's now got to get across that gap, and now he's set himself the situation. Has he gone too soon? Can he get across the gap with the Spanish rider? And there's not much time to make all these decisions. That's Ivan Basso, number 2, 15 is Neerman, and it looks as though Garcia Alonso suffered but has got back onto the tail of that group. This is Rick Verbrugge in pursuit now.
Well, the legs obviously felt good, which is why he went. He'd spoken to the teammates on the Valley Road before. He said, look, let's try and reduce the gap to those leading group of 8 riders at the moment, and if I can, I will try and set everything up on the next climb of the day. He's doing that right now, and in fact it's very difficult to see if he's not caught and passed the Spanish rider, because for the moment it looks to me as if he may well have left him behind and set off in a lone pursuit.
This is a fine piece of riding now, but he has made a decision. And at this time of the year, you don't know how long those legs stay feeling strong. He keeps looking over his shoulder as if to say, I'm not sure about this. Is he going to keep going, or is he not going to keep going? We're going into the trees now, and that will help him out of sight, perhaps out of mind for Verbrugge. The attack's coming on the Côte de Boisseau. Inside 28 kilometers to go when they started the attacks. We're now less than that. We're about 25 from the finish here. And that breakaway seems to have reorganised itself just that little bit.
And Eric Decker caught in no man's land at the moment. He was so close to getting onto the back of that group at the bottom of this climb. But you know, he was riding very strongly, and I feel by the summit of the climb he may well make the junction. In fact, as we speak, here is Eric Decker. He's ridden a marvellous race here, Phil. He's ridden right across a gap of 1 minute 45 seconds, and that now is going to make 9 leaders at the front of this race.
Well, that is a superb chase, and Decker just about latches on now. The first man you'll see is the man who started all the pain. No, it isn't. That is Unai Echeverria, also got back to this breakaway after suffering on the climb. There's the man who started the break, 113. Garcia Alonso. Look at the speed of Decker. He's gone right round them, hit them again. He wants to obviously get rid of everybody who's not feeling good in that break.
That's a good move. That's one right out of the attacking handbook as well. As soon as you come onto the back of a group, if you're still feeling strong, hit them immediately before they even know you're there, and that's what he's done. This is the sight of Rick Verbrugge. He's now trying to ride across the gap on his own. He caught and dispatched the Spanish rider who started the move. This was more of a counter-attack by Rick Verbrugge. His advantage over the main field now, not much more than 30 seconds, and I would think big names like Michele Bartoli, Phil, have got to sit up and look at a move like this.
But this is a hard chase. I make him 1 minute and 22 seconds still behind the action up front, and Decker has got up there first as the messenger boy. We're into the barren trees. Spring is on its way, I promise you that, as we go round through the Ardennes now. Most of these are hardwood trees. They do tend to leaf a little bit later than the other trees, but even so, I still think they're a bit behind schedule. This is Unai Echeverria sitting at the back now, no longer interested in taking any part in the pacemaking, hoping he can hang on and get himself a good result. Followed by Koos Moerenhout, the man on Domo Friets now. He used to ride for Rabobank, was a winner last year for them.
Interesting to see Koos Moerenhout in this situation, Phil, because I've never really regarded him as much of a climber. But this is a tough course today, and he got away in the early part of it, which is why he was able to integrate into this, what is now 9-man leading group. He's sitting at the back very much, and as you were mentioning about Unai Echeverria on the back here, he, I think, is pretty much on the limit right now, but you can see there's a fair amount of wetness coming onto the roads. The temperature's not very much above freezing at the moment, but certainly the sun is finally out and warming the air for these bike riders, as this man has set out on what is a very brave effort for the moment.
Yeah, absolutely true, Paul. You see they're wearing their arm warmers. It has been extremely cold. We have had snow flurries, we've had heavy rain. They were lucky. The rain fell before they got to the area, so the roads are drying out again for them. And you need luck sometimes, as this man now is looking to race across the gap. It looks as though he's going by himself here. He's shed himself of the Spanish rider, and he's trying desperately to cross the barren expanse of the Wallonne area of Belgium all on his own. This is a race in which he is always inspired. He rode so well in it last year and got second. There's the breakaway. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 riders turning the corner. Hanging on the back is Unai Echeverria. Now, do we get a chance to see Verbrugge come into sight? And I think we do, Paul. That man has closed that gap. This has been a totally inspired chase. He's gone clear of the field with all of the fancied men, and this man, started race favourite, is having to do it all by himself. Now, when you do that, you really are a good bike rider.
Well, that's pretty impressive. It's very strange tactics, though, because we've just seen Eric Decker do a similar thing. But in fact, Phil, I think we can just get a glimpse of the whole of the main field, so he hasn't got that much advantage. There are 3 or 4 riders coming across right now.
I don't think it's the main field. We'll find out if the camera pulls back. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. The whole field is closing in here. I reckon we've got about a 45-second spread now from the front of the breakaway to the main field going through.
Well, if it's that close, this is not such a great move now for Rick Verbrugge, because he's putting in an awful lot of effort, Phil, to try and get himself alone up to that leading group of 9. He needs a couple of riders to come across and join him right now if he's going to think of any chance of staying clear to the finish. And you can be sure that Mappé, they've got one man on the front right now, will send a lot more riders forward, because moving into 7th position there, you can just see the green, white and red jersey of Michele Bartoli. Bartoli obviously looking for a victory here. He's a very aggressive bike rider, and the speed in the main field now is certainly very much on.
But with this change of wind direction, when we made that left turn, Paul, you know how difficult it is. You've raced in this open countryside. The wind catches you from the other side. If you're in any way weak, you're hanging on, aren't you?
You can be sure the Belgian riders know this course absolutely perfectly. They know exactly when the wind is going to change direction and when the course will at front. In fact, talking of Belgians, it's the Belgian national champion right on the front at the moment, Axel Merckx. A little bit of a comeback for Axel. He'll be looking to ride well at the weekend in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. A very unfortunate start to the year with a crazy crash during Paris-Nice, but the acceleration there, Phil, has actually reduced the numbers of that main field, and as you say, I would say only around about 45 riders left in that group.
Yes, now back to the man who's becoming the star of the moment, Maybe a foolish move though, you know, because he's not that far ahead of the bunch, even though he is absolutely flying up to the rear of that leading group now. Eric Decker got there first, tried to break up the group, it didn't work, they all got back, but it shut down time in the field.
It shut down time in the field again, and once more you see it's the riders from Rabobank moving forward to try and discourage anybody from chasing behind. Now this is going to be good for Rick Verbrugge, but Verbrugge has a two-pronged attack as well. Let's not forget his man Mario Arts is in this group. This is Mappé at the front, trying to stir it up, trying to get a little bit more speed in the front of the main field right now. Obviously they're not too excited by the presence of their man Luca Paolini in the front group. They want the man in the group for them to be Michele Bartoli.
Bartoli's still searching for that magical form after his serious crash in the Tour of Germany. He's come back a little bit. He's won one of his few wins last year, the Championship of Italy. He's had popped up for one win this year on the island of Mallorca, but he's not the man we used to know, and he's still looking for that form. The field now being impeded by a number of teammates who have got riders in that front group, and again riders who want to chase down, still thinking of Sunday's Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but now here we go again.
Well, this is Axel Merckx. He was riding at the front of the main field, and he's actually got off the front of the main field right now, and that was a very impressive attack by Axel.
Inspired move perhaps. His father always rode well in this race, and Axel now trying to do something as well. But we're looking back now at a Mappé rider here, and this looks as though that's another rider trying to get across the gap. It's a free-for-all just at the moment.
It certainly is. It looks a little bit like Paolo Bettini trying to get off the front there.
Oh, he's a small rider.
It is in fact Bettini, the winner of last year's Liège-Bastogne-Liège. He too will be very much at home. That's the advantage of riding for Mappé. They're coming into the kind of races that suit them now that they had that big split during the winter months. They've lost most of the Belgian riders, Wilfred Peters and Johan Museo, so not as competitive in the shorter races like Paris-Roubaix and Tour of Flanders, but the climbing ability of men like Bettini and Michele Bartoli puts them much more at ease on a course like this.
There's the crowd looking at this man, their man, Rick Verbrugge. Little cheer and an applause for him as he makes that sharp left-hand turn. No signs of encouragement up front just yet, because the helicopter, by the way, is flying over the main field, so he can't use the helicopter to distinguish where those 8 or 9 breakaway riders are. Well, we can see them, and here they are now. They look as though they've each achieved their limits here today, Paul, because they are no longer attacking one another, and I'm not too sure how strong their legs are.
Well, now they're reaching the very difficult part of the course, and the next big climb of the day will be the Benaïn, and that is where they will certainly be thinking about attacking to try and take out victory in the Fleche Wallonne. They will know just exactly how far behind the main field is, and that last time check we had was around about 45 seconds to the main field, but since then they seem to have turned it off just a little bit, Phil. And in the meantime, the man who's halfway across is having a hard time, and even Axel Merckx is still trying to launch himself off the front of the main group to get himself up to the leaders.
Almost a feeling of desperation in this group now. It's and in the chase group as well, because it's as if they're all committed and they're not quite going anywhere, and they know that the finish, once we get to the climb Paul mentioned, the Benaïn, and then we have a little bit of a hairpin descent, we get down to the main valley road, then we race back into Huy, and then we flick up the mountain, and that's it. Every man for himself. You either got it on the day or you haven't.
In fact, Axel has forced a small group off the front here. It keeps splitting up and coming back together again. And Axel will certainly be looking to try and get himself into a situation for a good performance, because he really does want to show off that Belgian National Championships jersey.
And why not? Dad wore it before him, and again another proud moment for Eddie when Axel pulled on the National Championships jersey. 20 kilometres to go, that's 12 miles now to the finish. And so the riders now, we still have those 9 leaders being chased by Rick Verbrugge. The peloton under pressure and not closing in, but there are around about 58 seconds between the break and the peloton. And Verbrugge is in between, so there will be times when he will probably be in sight of the bunch.
You know, he's not coming across quite as fast as Eric Decker did, Phil. Eric Decker obviously hit this race at the right time, riding across that gap. Quite a marvellous performance here. And what happens in a situation like this when you go out on the attack is you reach a limit, and that seems to be what's happening to Rick Verbrugge right now. But in fact, as we speak, he's gone round the corner, one of those corners you were talking about, and there's the group that he's trying to catch.
Now, how's that for an incentive? Now, if they look over his shoulder, they may not know he's coming. One would expect them to have been told by the team manager, but you never know. Back to the main field, and that's Merckx on the right again, looking for some help here. but I don't think he's going to get it now, as this field, no, they've lost one man that they really fancied. There they are, they're only just past the 20 kilometres to go, Banner. So if Verbrugge catches up with these leaders, it all depends what legs they've got left as to whether he can go alone or whether he will have to just settle in with them and see what happens.
Well, the strongest man in that group seemed to be César Solon, and he's the most likely to be the man to watch out for any counters. At the front of the main field there, you've got the riders from Rabobank. That is the champion of Switzerland, Markus Zuberg. His job really, Phil, will be to try and slow it down in one or two of these tricky little descents to give the advantage to Eric Decker, because when you ride across a gap like that, you certainly are going very well. This is almost the point of juncture for this man here, Rick Verbrugge, attacked at the bottom of the last climb, the Côte de Boisseau. A very long breakaway by him to try and bridge the gap, and that's just about to succeed. I would think he won't attack immediately. He will sit back and try and recuperate for 5 or 10 kilometres, but he will pay great attention to the position of the main field behind.
Oh, this has been superb, and this is a lovely area for Belgium. You can imagine riding here around these roads on your bikes. Perhaps a little warmer conditions required than it is right now. He's on, and I estimate 18 kilometres to go to the finish. Now, will he do a Decker and try to wipe them out in one hit, or will he take a few deep breaths? Latest time check coming in, it's confirmed of 58 seconds, the gap now to the race behind, so it's far from over.
He won't attack them now, Phil. I think he will sit on the back of that group for a short while. He will use the Benaïn as the next possibility of a launch pad to try and split that group, and he will be marked very closely by Decker. And the strongest remaining rider from the group, I would say, is César Solon, so he will be the man watching out for that next attack. But in the main field, they're starting to get pretty frisky now as well. They're inside of 1 minute, so it's not over at all for the main field. They will continue to keep eating away at that advantage, and I would think there'll be a lot of reaction coming from the Mapei squad, depending on the form today of Michele Bartoli, and he will have talked to the rest of the riders, but you can see they're actually freewheeling pretty much right now, looking over their shoulders, looking for a bit of help, and they won't get it from Rabobank and the champion of Switzerland there, Markus Zuberg.
It's got the sense of all over here, a question of who's going to win. That leading breakaway has split up. The weak ones have gone off the back. There's a decent split between them at the moment. And so Verbrugge is going to hurt them. An attack by Lotto. He rides with the style of Serge Baguet.
That's pretty strange if he wants to ride off the front of the main field, because he's got the ideal man in the breakaway situation right now. So I'm surprised to see him making a move like that, unless it is a way of trying to discourage the rest of the riders in the group not to take up the chase.
Well, at the moment, that front group is confirmed as having split into 2 equal portions. And they're going to have to decide now whether they can hang on, because there is a reaction back here, and the Rabobanks don't seem to be able to control it. Bartoli is fourth wheel and trying now to see what he can do. He's just watching and waiting. He hasn't got the kick yet that we've seen in the past. Now this is back with the leaders of the breakaway, and Basso has made the selection. Jörg Jakst is here. He's the man from Once. Just in front of him, I think, is Solon, and no doubt he started the action. And I expect to find Verbrugge up here, but no, we're finding the Mapei rider who has made the split up here.
Paolo
Paolini
is in there.
Yeah.
This is Eric Decker, and strangely enough, there is no sight at all of Rick Verbrugge for the moment. But Decker, Phil, really looking very strong, very comfortable, same position as when he came across the gap right now. In the main field, big attacks coming off the front from the Lotto squad. They're trying to ride off the front of the main field. This is Kurt van der Wouwe. They obviously have heard that there's a problem at the front for Rick Verbrugge. He maybe used too much energy, Phil, trying to get across the gap right now, which is the only explanation I can find for these attacks coming off the main field by Lotto.
Well, I really can't understand what he's doing here. Kurt van der Wouwe is a very good climber, a very strong man. If he goes alone, fair enough. But if he starts a reaction from the field, they won't like him at all. And look at this, the field is reacting to him, and he'd do well to think of sitting up. Let's have a look at a very disorganised front group here now. They're trying, these are coming back, are they? This is Decker surrendering. Some of the breakaway possibly going to be picked up now by the chase. No, there's a counter-attack off the road again, and that looks to me as though Jakst has launched it.
Right on his wheel is César Solon, and Basso responding there in the white jersey for Fasso Bortolo. In fact, the Mapei rider there, Paolini, he's been caught out. Looking back a little further down the road there's another group of riders coming across to this leading group, but this is a very dangerous time. We're on the flat section now as we ride along towards the valley of Huy. And just rejoining here, there's another move coming across. These guys have come out of the group. This is Udo Boltz. given a free hand today, one of the domestiques for Jan Ulrich at the Tour de France. And this move here contains two very good riders from Domo Farm Friets. This one here, 63, is Steve de Wolf. And in fact, it's the whole field once again, Phil.
Yeah, the whole field, but I'm wondering now what has happened to Rick Verbrugge. He was in the split, and I think he's gone forward in the forward split. Our camera's a little bit all over the place just now, trying to sort out for themselves, I think, with so many attacking riders coming off the front. We are getting down to around 10 kilometres to go here. The field are getting excited. It has been reduced to quite amazingly in these last few kilometres by the constant attacks, but there's still that group of riders just up the road. And Verbrugge is in amongst it, and we're back with him now, and he's got two Rabobanks. It looks as though we've had a bit of a regrouping. This is Verbrugge. Both Rabobanks have made it. Number 12 is Decker. Number 15 is Neerman. And I think it's Basso tagged on behind these three. And are they coming back to the split? I think they are, Paul.
Well, I can't understand this at all, because in fact Rick Verbrugge looked very strong. He must have got caught out with some kind of a problem there, and he's now trying to ride himself back into the front of this main field, this main group, I should say, the group that was just a few moments ago 9 riders strong. He's getting a fair amount of help here from Neerman on the front. The Rabobank boys obviously feel tactically superior right now, because Eric Decker is obviously having a great day, having ridden across a 1 minute 45 gap. And these riders now are trying to chase up to the 3 leaders, Solon and Jörg Jach, then the other rider from Italy, Basso, and they've just about done it.
Big effort by Verbrugge, that, especially when they hit him just after he latched on. And Solon is looking for it today. He's riding like a winner, and he's a good climber. Now, that's the way to do it. When you catch up with leaders, you don't just freewheel up behind them and see how they're going. You attack them straight away, and if they're feeling weak, get rid of them. But they weren't. They're on the back now as they come together. Jaxt and Solon jumping onto that train as we now begin to run down the side of the River Meuse here, which links Holland with Holland with Belgium. We're right on the borders here now, down in Spa, and we've still got the big climb to come. There's the peloton going very quick over the ground, and this looks to me like it is Yvon Basso, who is also just hanging on there now. But believe it or not, Paul, they are coming back, all of them regrouping.
Absolutely amazing. It could all very... Oh, this is a bit of a tricky
Ouch.
one here, and Rick Verbrugge's gone the wrong way around that roundabout. Well, actually, it was the right way. The others took the wrong way, and the race has split up completely. This is the problem with professional cycling nowadays, Phil. It is out on the open road, and a lot of this furniture they're putting on the roads to direct traffic is becoming very dangerous to race on. But it's fine for Verbrugge. A big shout from a Belgian supporter at the side of the road there, and he's back on with the leaders.
Oh, that was lucky, and a lot of energy wasted at the wrong time. He's had a little bit of a rough ride since coming up to this breakaway. He has not recovered from the chase at all. He had to bridge a gap, don't forget, of almost 2 minutes to reach this breakaway, which he's done. And that breakaway has thinned out slightly. Gone is Unai Echeverria of the orange jersey from the Euskaltel team. And it looks as though we've got some 7 riders still here, and now the pressure going on again. Verbrugge's amazing. Look at that. Once the road goes up, he's using his strength, and he's trying to shake off the tail.
This is the penultimate climb of the day, the Côte de Benaïn. It's a very hard climb indeed. Verbrugge went straight to the front there. That was to nullify any possibility of more counterattacks. He wants to keep the group together right now. Moving into 3rd place there is Eric Decker. This is the ideal place to launch an attack if you've got the legs. And I would think 1 or 2 of these riders in this group now, Phil, have got legs a little bit like jelly, because look at that. The pressure of Verbrugge on the front has popped, I think, Eric Decker right off the wheel. Decker going to the back of the line there. In fact, off the back of the line. In 2nd position is Basso. So Decker is not so good anymore.
No, I think he's paying for the chase. The elastic suddenly snapped with Eric. The old leg said, we've had enough for the day, goodbye, and left him there. 5 riders going clear. Solon on the back, looking still immensely strong to me. This is Eric, not panicking at this stage, hoping he'll recover once over the top. Has he? Well, he could get back once they settle down again.
He's going to have to not panic very much at all, and also not lose more than about 30 seconds over the summit of this climb, because Rick Verbrugge is really setting the tempo on the front of the line here. He's not getting any help at all from number 2, Basso, in 2nd position there. Paolini is in 3rd place for the Mapei squad. But that was amazing. He was right on the wheel, was Eric Decker, and he looked to be riding so comfortably. Then all of a sudden he popped. You can see the race referee there in the red shirt going forward. He's trying to get all the motorbikes out of the way, because they can sense that there's going to be an attack. But I think there might be a recovery by the main field, Phil, because the race referee's car, that red one, is going by right now.
Well, you might be right, Paul. We've got no time check since that near 1 minute gap. I think they're still hovering around 1 minute, because looking down from the helicopter. There's the breakaway. There's a fair bit of clear road behind them just yet. One rider still off the back because the cars are being held at a distance. Now here is the peloton being pushed on by Mappe. Mappe have lost their man in that breakaway. Bartley, such a good rider. There he is on the right, that green top to his jersey. He's never far from the action, Paul, is he? He always sits there, watches everything.
That's why he earned his nickname early on in his career, I should say, Il Cato, the cat, because he was always ready to pounce on a breakaway situation. He's got his team on the front now. In second position now is Paolo Bettini, but a man riding also very much to the front of this group is Michael Bogard. And if he's got any news, these are some remnants now of that breakaway. There is Echavarria, there is Koos Burnhout. So those three riders originally in the breakaway back in the fold.
I think that was also the man that started it. Garcia Alonso has gone back into the group. Signal for Seiko to have a little dig now. Well, that's unusual at this stage of this race. Not great climbers in the Seiko team, but they too are hoping for a wild card place in the Tour de France. They're not in yet.
Well, it's very difficult right now to try and get off the front of this pack. Paolo Bettini in second position, responding very much not for himself today but for Michele Bartoli. He wants to make sure that he stays onto the wheel of this rider from Seiko, but in fact right now, Phil, he's been absolutely popped off it. This is a real tempo on the front here. The race is still going on very much at the front, and those riders now are only about 20 metres in front of Eric Decker, who seems to be recovering.
Back with the leaders, Rick Verbrugge here pacing Ivan Basso, the little Italian man who can sprint, but I don't think he'll sprint too well up the Mer de Huy. Yes, is Jax, the German, on his Onse team now, and just behind him the strong man of the race by the look of it, Cesar Salon. He has ridden so well, just indeed as Verbrugge had to get up to the leaders, as Decker did, but Decker's paid the price. Verbrugge seems to have recovered and seems to be riding now with great rhythm here.
Looks very comfortable right now. He's tapping out a rhythm that is comfortable to himself. He's just riding very comfortably on the front of this pack. The reason he's doing it, Phil, is to try and make sure that there are no surprise counter-attacks, but it seems as if they have got rid of Eric Decker right now. This group is down to 4. Another acceleration coming from Verbrugge, ticking out here a very pleasant rhythm for himself, but one that is not comfortable for anyone else. Basso, on the other hand, is absolutely suffering there to stay on his wheel, as is Jax. Salone now, for the first time, look at the grimace on his face here.
Big effort.
He's been put under pressure.
Big effort. He's keeping on the big chainwheel there. Amounts of pressure put on by the smooth pedalling Verbrugge. Basso looks as though he's got no problems here in responding, as he hangs on to Rick Verbrugge. Verbrugge now 26 years of age, by the way. Only had one win last year, but the big thing was he was second in this event. He is the national time trial champion. Well, I think he explained that to us when he rode across the gap to get up to the leaders. Now he's trying to hurt them and get rid of them. I think to feel safe, he would like to climb up to the finish alone.
Absolutely, that's the only way to win this bike race. Now I think the news must have come through, because this is Michael Bogard trying to get off the front of the pack here. He obviously has heard that his man at the front, Eric Decker, is in difficulty, and he too is trying to split the field. It's still, Phil, a very large group at the moment, more than 45 riders in strength.
So, Michael Bogard himself having a wonderful start to the year. He's got the legs, but he's got to get up there to use them. He's played one card that hasn't worked, and now he's going to have to try and close this gap down with a little help from other teammates and other team riders. Bogart chasing Rick Verbrugge, who's inspired in this particular race. He was second in it last year. This year he's had a good start to the season. He won a stage. He won 2 stages, in fact, and including the time trial stage and the overall of the Criterium International. And that's the first Belgian rider ever to win that race, by the way, which is most unusual.
Looking back down the road there, you can see a lot of activity, and I think the main field starting to close in on this group of 4 riders. Eric Decker not there at all now, completely popped off the back there on the Côte de Benaïn. Looking further down the road, there's no sign of the man in the orange jersey from Holland, and that will be a bitter blow, I think, for Rabobank, because it looked like an excellent move by them, and I think it would have taken a bit of responsibility off the shoulders of their man Michael Bogard, but now they've been put into a position, Phil, where they have to go out on the attack. Michele Bartoli now has decided to launch off the front.
big show of bravado, is this? Or is this just a real serious wind-up? I reckon he's hoping he can inspire others to follow his lead and get the chase going. Look at the speed of this man and the crack in the field about 5 men back. He's broken them with this turn of speed at Bartley. But what he'll do now, if he's true to form, he'll sit up and he'll shout at everybody and say, well, come on, give us a hand. He often does that, doesn't he, Paul?
Absolutely there. And in fact, as you speak, he's done just that.
That's amazing.
He's taken the acceleration up and he's split the field, but he wants the other guys to do the work.
Now then, he's moving over and says, well, I've got the speed, but when I stop, somebody else give me a hand. We've got the gap because the peloton there is at full stretch. Back to the leaders. Here they are.
Well, Rick Verbrugge doing an awful lot of work in this group and nobody else at the moment helping him. And I would say probably, Phil, because they can't help him. We're still over the summit of the Côte de Benaïn. It's a very difficult false flat before we then plunge back down into the valley alongside the Meuse. And then it's a flat run into the town of Huy, for then the very difficult ascent. The last kilometre of this race is uphill, and there are some very difficult corners on that climb where you need to go right down into the lowest gear that you've got on that machine.
Sharp left-hand bend here for the riders. This is the main field coming.
Again, Bartley off the front, trying to get a small group, Phil. That's the only way he knows now to get across to this leading group of 4 riders. If he can get a group of 5 or 6 riders, then they've got a chance of bridging the gap right now. But it seems as if his team doesn't have the power to come to the front and organise a super big chase.
Well, this race has been coursing around these roads of the Ardennes since 1936. We're now into the 65th edition of it. And it's thrown up some great winners. But there are riders in that breakaway. Their nation has never won. There has never been, by the way, a Spanish winner of this event, and that rider at the back, César Solon, has ridden so well today, he might be thinking about a Spanish win.
It certainly is the kind of finish for a Spanish rider, because you've got to be a great climber to win the Fleche Wallonne. 31. There is Michele Bartley, and once again he's forced a small group off the front of this main field right now. They're being covered very often by the Lotto riders. That's probably Mario Ertz in there at the moment. They won't at all contribute to the success of a chase led by Michele Bartley, because they're in the situation of having their man in the leading group of 4 riders at the moment. The leading group of 4 still working very much together. As we take a quick look at Il Cato here. Come on, he says, ride with me.
Yeah.
And a typical Italian gesture there.
A little explaining from the other Lotto man saying, why should I ride? My man is in the lead. I'm very happy with the situation. And so that's the way it is. I was just thinking though, Paul, you know, we haven't had a Belgian winner of this race either since Claude Croquillon, who won in 89 and is also the previous Belgian in 85. And he is now in the managementship of the Lotto team.
And I tell you what, though, we've had an awful lot of Italian wins since then.
Yeah, they have enjoyed it,
This certainly has been an Italian-dominated event. Yeah, Claude Croquillon, the last Belgian winner of this race, in the team car today of Lotto. He's now much more involved with the management since the removal of Jean-Luc Van den Broeke. And I think he will bring a lot of tactical knowledge to the riders in races like this, because these were the Crix races, as he was called. That was his nickname. A very good friend of Sean Kelly's, who always excelled in the Fleche Wallonne and Liège-Bastogne-Liège.
With a name like Croquillon, they used to call him Crick the Line. And you used to see the banners flying high in the Alps and the Pyrenees on the Tour de France. He was one of the few Belgians who was a very good mountain climber as well. But he's watching from the comfort of a car today, and no doubt got the heater running as well, because it is a bit chilly out there. So we're looking here, there's only one other German ever won this race too, Rolf Goltz, back in 88. Not long ago he retired, and we've got Jatsk in here right now on the Onse team. So there's a little bit of history possibly in the making now. If these 4 can hold off the chase, it won't be easy, you know. The bunch is racing behind them at just on 40 seconds. It's touch and go.
This is the descent now off the Côte de Benaïn. Halfway down this descent, by the way, there is a very tricky left-hand hairpin bend, which nearly every year we see somebody go down on it. For the moment, fortunately, the road is fairly dry. César Solon had a hard ride to get across here, but he now must be thinking about the climb up to the finish. And most of these riders know the finish very well, Phil, because even if they are first-year professionals, they spend almost the whole week staying in the town of Liège, not too far from here, and that is where they go out training to do reconnaissance of the climbs of Liège, Bastogne-Liège and the Fleche Wallonne. So one thing they certainly do is come out and take a look. There's one of the first hairpin bends, a very difficult one there, and all 4 riders very safely around. A chance to look back up the road there. For the moment, no sight of anybody else. So these riders still quite comfortably 30 seconds in advance of the main field.
Well, I wouldn't call that quite comfortable though, Paul. That's because they've been hovering up there now for a long time. They've seen their breakaway disintegrate. Everybody else, as far as we know, has fallen back and gone into the pack. So the pack are going to take encouragement from that. But Verbrugge is still riding like a man inspired. It's almost as if he says, well, look, I've made a real effort to get across this break and I'm not going to give it back to the bunch right now. And he's doing all of the work for himself. And to his credit, Paul, I've never seen him turn around and say, look, guys, we all stand to win a high position. Give me a hand. He just gets on with the job.
Well, he needs to actually ask them to come forward and do a bit of work right now, because he's doing all of the pacemaking, giving these other three riders, who although they've been in the breakaway for a long time, it gives them the chance to just recover a little bit, because you save between 20 and 30% of your energy sitting on the wheel of the rider in front. And right now this man is giving full energy, 100% for him. His face has been in the wind since the start of the Côte de Benaïn, and I would think once we get onto the flatter part of the road, down in the outskirts of Huy, he must force some of these other riders in the group forward, because otherwise he's going to have a hard time, especially if we do get a vicious attack coming from César Solon, the rider in the blue jersey at the back from ibanesto.com.
Interesting to see that Verbrugge's brought out one of the old hairnet type crash helmets. He must have had that treasured in his suitcase somewhere, rather than the new style streamlined crash helmets made of the like of papier-mâché. But anyway, these four riders represent four different teams and on four different nationalities: an Italian, a Spanish rider, a German rider, and setting the pace all of the way here, the Belgian rider Rick Verbrugge. Verbrugge inspired. He'll be tough to beat, but I hope he isn't throwing all of his energy to the wind. Back to the chase now. They've clearly swept up Neerman and Dekker, because the Rabobanks are now driving three riders here.
Well, they're on the front now. They realise that they made a serious blunder in their tactics by allowing Dekker to ride across the gap. That's Marcus Zeberg there. The reason they're doing this is to try and set it up for a sprint finish now for their man, and their man is Michael Bogard. He'd be second in command after that move by Eric Dekker. Zeberg, a great sprinter, but not the man likely to get up the climb of the Mur de Huy, and they really are putting a lot of pressure on at the front. Mappe obviously not able to break the stranglehold and get their man Michele Bartoli further forward, and this is a super chase down into the finish. If they time it to perfection, they could catch those four riders just at the bottom of the Mur de Huy.
Well, this is where we run off the hills now, down to the Meuse, and then the valley road to the town of Spa, and then out of the town we climb up the Huy. A vicious ascent. Every time you see it for the first time you think, my goodness, we can't really race up that. It's even a hard climb for the crowd to walk up, and there is a great crowd there at the moment.
It's not too far to go right now. César Solon, the Spanish rider at the back here, looking very comfortable, looks very strong. Jörg Yacht, the German rider, looking a little bit more upright. I would be surprised to see Ivan Basso running out the winner here, Phil, because he is not a great climber. He's much more renowned as a very good finisher. As we get now down off the slopes of the Côte de Benaïn, we're not too far now from approaching the outskirts of the town of Huy. And still, it's Rick Verbrugge on the front. He's riding now a little bit like a madman to me. You can see, in fact, as they come down into the outskirts of town, I would expect Verbrugge to move across to one side and force these other guys to come and work with him.
Let's not forget, Paul, that Basso rode well in the Tour of the Mediterranean this year. You know this climb very well because you won the King of the Mountains in this race, I think. And Basso won the climb to the top of Montferrand. Now that's a little bit longer than the slopes of the Huy, but it's not quite as steep.
Well, it's a very difficult climb, the Montferrand. It's around about 5.5 kilometres long, but it's a different time of the season. It's coming in the month of February. Different riders maybe don't quite have their climbing legs on at that time of the season. You can see now, though, that Rabobank Phil have certainly got the bit between the teeth. They feel that they've got to bring this breakaway back. They've made a serious tactical blunder today by allowing this breakaway to get off the front, and they should have had a different man going forward rather than Eric Dekker, who I must say looked absolutely fantastic, magnificent the way he rode across that gap, but he popped absolutely once they got across that climb.
Well, what can you say about Rick Verbrugge? There's the River Meuse. It's the River Meuse in the Belgian language, the River Maas in the Dutch language, but it's the same river and it crosses between the two countries. And this man is a flyer today. He hasn't looked back, he hasn't asked them for any help. I just hope they realise that, because they might all try to jump around him very shortly. And Basso of Italy, winner of a stage, the opening stage of the Tour of the Mediterranean, right down in the south of France this year, when he won on the climb of Montferrand. We've got Jörg Yacht, also a winner, and the man just behind, César Solon, he's also a winner. so they know how to win bike races, these guys, as we rush into Spa now. But this guy just does not look round for any help. He's got it getting on with it.
Got to feel super confident to ride on the front like that. He must have absolutely fantastic legs. The other two guys in the breakaway, you can see Basso in second position and Yax in third position. He obviously feels he's got the better of them because they were in the breakaway for an awful long time. But the man at the back, he really needs to look out for César Salón, wearing 178 there, because he's a Spanish climber, a very good bike rider. And you know, Rick Verbrugge has not swung off once at all. And that's a very risky thing to do. He needs a little bit of a break for at least 400 or 500 meters, I'm sure.
And you've got to take your hat off here to the Rabobanks. They know that they've blown this. They played the lead tactics with two men. They've both died at the front. Now we're coming up to the start of the climb. Look at the crowd. They've buried this off well this year now, because this is the start of week. And still Verbrugge is driving. Now, can he lift this pace here? Because just round that corner ahead of the car, this kicks so steeply. And are they kidding behind, or is Verbrugge just going to ride them off his wheel?
Well, he's still riding at the front. He's not looked over his shoulder to look at the faces of the riders on his wheel at the moment. In third position, you can see Yax is starting to back off a little bit. We haven't even got to the steepest part of the climb yet, Phil, and you are right. There's a short left-hand bend in a moment, and it really gets very steep. Yax has gone out of the action. He has popped. Salón is trying to move up to the wheel of Basso. Basso looks over his shoulder now and sees that everybody's in difficulty, but he's holding onto the wheel there of Rick Verbrugge. Very shortly it will kick up, and that's when the pain kicks in.
30 seconds, they're saying. The main field are coming onto the climb at 30 seconds the gap. They might well catch anybody now that fades in the next half a kilometre or so. Salón, I thought he was going to do it. 500 metres to go. His legs up. There's the field on the climb, Paul. They're right up behind now. Salón has gone. Yax has gone. Look at the face of Rick Verbrugge.
Well, Rick Verbrugge now digging very deep indeed. Basso's a little bit off the wheel. In fact, this is the steepest part. This is where you really have to kick. You see the look over his shoulder. He will get confidence from that now, Phil. Going deeper, the Belgian crowd going absolutely potty.
This is a tremendous atmosphere. The sun has come out for the man who has worked his heart out today. He not only crossed the gap to the leaders, he took over command and has done all of the pacemaking. This man is the most deserved winner of the Fleche for many a day. He's up the climb and he hasn't won yet. It will kick again very shortly, but he's now cracked Ivan Basso, who could try and hang on for second, but they could be back to the bunch very shortly because they'll be coming up with a thunder. Now look at Basso, cheered all the way. The Belgians love a home winner, of course. It's been a while since they've cheered one up here. Go back to 1985 and Claude Croquillon, and 89 Croquillon did it again, and since then there's never been a Belgian up first.
Claude Croquillon is the team manager of this man who is flying at the moment. He's not going to crack, Phil. The movement is still very fluid. He's still ticking those pedals over. Let's not forget he's probably in his lowest sprocket right now. Very shortly he will come into a very short finishing straight and he will see the banner above him. But what a magnificent ride here by Verbrugge. Inside 200 metres to go.
The big effort on his face. This has been ultimate riding for him. It has been his aim. He said at the start he thought he could improve on last year. He was right. The cameras foreshorten the lens there. Basso won't get anything better than second, and he might not hang on because that looks like Yaxtu's coming up in third. So he's got over the top of Salón. The motorbike's now getting mixed up with the head of the peloton. They're not far behind, but reserve all of your cheers today for this rider. Rick Verbrugge of Belgium has pulled out the best performance of his life. Absolutely superb. Verbrugge over first. Basso chasing him all the way, about 10 seconds back in second. Now third is Yax. So fourth, will it be Salón or will the peloton get him?
Well, it's going to be very hard. That was a tough final few metres there. Salón is just there, but coming up is the main field.
And that's David Echevarria, not Unai, who gets the fifth place. Unai was in the break. David gets the place that matters in fifth. Just behind was Francesco Casagrande. We didn't see much of him today, did we? And again, Michele Bartoli, I think, creeping in there. There's the arrival of Axel Merckx in the centre of our picture. He's going to finish in midfield, top 20 with a bit of luck. As the clock on the left counts down, the time for the ride today was 4 hours and 50 minutes. Now that was a devastating ride by Rick Verbrugge. We've seen some great rides, but that will go down as one of the very, very best.
Very impressive, and I think that will make Belgium exceptionally happy because it's been a long time since they've had a man able to compete in these classics in the Ardennes, and obviously Rick Verbrugge rode that to perfection. I have to admit I thought he was a bit crazy for a few moments there, Phil, because he was riding such a hard race on the front, not asking for any help at all, but he must have felt absolutely remarkable.
Superb. What a good win for Lotto at a time when it counts in a race organised for the Tour de France, because they are hoping, of course, for a wild card place in that great event. Little bit of a look back to the finish again. This is where it happened in the end. He rode from the front. Longest lead out you'll ever get from anybody. Lasted about 20 kilometres. And then he just rode away from the opposition, who sat there all of the way. They should give him their prize money, because he did the lot today. Rick Verbrugge of Belgium now doing what his team manager did in 1989 and 1985. Claudie Criquillon. Rick Verbrugge puts Belgium back on top of the map in their own event, La Fleche, Wallonne. So good luck to Rick Verbrugge. That really was a ride. And there it is, the podium. Verbrugge ahead of Ivan Basso, Jorg Jakst. Salon got 4th, Echevarria was 5th, and Francesco Casagrande, he snatched the 6th place. This has been a terrific Fleche Wallonne. Hope you've enjoyed it. Paul Sherwin, I'm Phil Liggett saying we'll see you at the Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Until then, goodbye.